All right, we got another astrology video today. Fuck, I don't know how to put it. We have another astrology video today, and it is the moon in the fourth house. The moon in the fourth house. We have the fourth house, which is the house of your past. Which is your childhood. You may have a stronger connection to your mother. With this placement, right? you know you have that gone for you. You have inner strength from your past and everything you've been through in life. You go there and you try to use that to help you get through shit, right? And you're also attracted to people who are have that type of energy, family oriented energy, family, childhood, you know more introverted energy. This house is, and then of course, the moon sign is also like that's your emotional state. That's your subconscious mind. That is you know your soul in essence. In effects, right? Um. So now that we're through with that, right? We got the moon in Aries in the fourth house. The moon in Aries in the fourth house. You, as the Aries moon, are powerful. You get triggered by people who talk shit about your family. You know, most shit might roll off of you. No matter what your sun sign is, right? Or maybe you are like that, but like you're even more fucking aggressive and more, loud about shit, right? When they bringing up your family and shit they don't know about, or maybe you're showing like traits of like being childish, and then they're like bringing up, oh, you know, why are you acting so like that? You must have grew up in a house like, and then you just go the fuck off because they don't know like what relationship you had with your family. They don't know that it might not, you probably do care about your family, but you're living your life because you need to like, because this is Aries. This is like, I'll fight for my family. I'll die for my family. You know, but I'm also gonna make sure I get what I need to because I'm still a person too. You I'm still a motherfucker who has to do what he has to do or she has to do. I cannot fucking be, you know, always up my family's ass. And I love my family too. You might be one of those people, or maybe you didn't come from a family like that, but you still have that in you where, if they were like fucking with somebody, you're like, but that's mine. Like me, like I might not like my brother or my sister, but you gonna fuck with them, man. You'll come to blows with somebody over some shit, just because of that your family was still an important part of your life. Even if you didn't, you weren't on the same page, or you weren't doing whatever, you still care about them. This person, you know does shit like that for the people they love. When especially it's like when they get emotionally triggered, right? Because this is the moon sign, right? So typically they might not usually be like that, but when like you bring up shit like that, and you try to act like you know about this person, hey man, you probably don't, and that's why they got in your face and they were about to like, or they already like swung on you and shit because you were acting like you knew what like made them who they were, or you were trying to like talk down to like who helped make them. They're family members. Their childhood didn't mean shit in your eyes. So they then went out and they attacked you. Because you were fucking with them their own way. And they did, lash out at you emotionally, possibly. The person with Aries moon. But it was because you triggered them in that way. And you didn't have to do that. So the next person is Taurus, right? Taurus moon in the fourth house. This person, right? This person is so the Taurus moon is a great moon placement. This person knows how to you know, chill with their emotions. They know why they feel the way they feel, and that shit comes and goes. Um, because this is Taurus, right? This is the person who's more patient, a person who's more practical, but like towards like what they feel they need to do. See, they truly know what they need to do. Not they ain't gonna like always look for other people to help them out. See, in a family dynamic, right? These people will try to take shit on themselves. They might be harder on themselves. They might be like, oh well, I didn't do this enough for my family members. I didn't do this enough, so now I have to do more for them. I have to give more time to my family. And that is good to do that. But it comes to a point where you also then, and this person would realize it too, where you're like, who am I? When I'm like not with the family. I still love my family. I love my family. I provide for them. I would even, and then Taurus does the same shit, as Aries, I would, kill somebody for my family members, you know, because I love them and shit. Cause like they did, you know, I was there for them, even if I was there for them more, I still don't hate them, you know. I just, gotta do me, or if I'm still in with my family, you know, I'm gonna just always be there for them, regardless of if they're, doing their part or not. They're the ones who's like always there, and like basically, they don't get, you know, they don't ever get the fucking like credit they deserve sometimes, but they might feel that way, and when they get emotionally triggered, and then they close themselves off. They might not be talking with everybody in the family, but they still like do things for the family. You know what I mean? It's not like they're there, but they're just there. You know, observing things, not really talking much. And some people in the family might not appreciate them because they ain't doing so much. But they like do the like other things, like make sure like people are taken care of, like with money maybe, or I can take you to your dance recital, or whatever the fuck it might be for like anybody's situation. They're dependable within the family, right? And then when it comes to like other people and getting them triggered, they'll like let shit like go. Like they'll just be like, not let shit go necessarily, but they'll put you in your place. They'll be like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. My family this, my family that. But they wouldn't even say that. They'll just tell you you're a fucking idiot and you have to go somewhere else because you don't know. You don't know. They might even keep their family shit private. Because that's the type of shit they do. I am me. You're attacking me. You don't know shit about them. That's how Taurus views it. Like they ain't gonna be talking about their family like that. They might be like that type of person, like where they don't tell you shit. Like you don't even know I have family. Like you don't know shit about it. You're just looking at me and you don't like the way I look. So I might have to get fucking active on you too. But they also, let shit, not let shit develop, but like, if it's necessary, they'll, do shit like that. They get emotionally triggered too, but they close down first. They shut down first. It seems like they don't talk and spout nonsense. They shut down and they let people ramble on about whatever the fuck they thought, and then they just come to the thing terms where okay, yeah, they pissed me off. Like I'm about to fly the fuck off on this person, but it's also gonna like cause problems for us if this escalates. I'm trying to, I'm keeping my cool the best I fucking can because this motherfucker over here does not know. Like they don't. They just gonna say shit about my family, gonna say shit about how I was raised and other things. Once shit starts, coming down, then they're gonna do stuff. But and they try to not. have shit escalate so much. Like they don't like doing that shit. They don't like, causing more problems for people and other things. This person just is not knowledgeable on my past or anything like that. But this person who has that energy is still pissed off. Like this Taurus moon is still pissed off. They just don't, they don't just fly off right away. And they're like, okay, this motherfucker don't know shit. He actually looks ignorant if he's trying to make a spectacle of whatever, or she is, you know, because I'm actually doing what I have to do. These people like to try to, you know, they don't put up walls necessarily. They just don't like to put like their emotional, like all that shit on people, and they still do. Like what I mean by that is like if they're fucked up, right, and somebody goes to check on them, that person going to check on them knows why they're, they'll feel their pain, or whatever they're going through, their anger, their frustration, their, you know, whatever, and this person has the ability to like make you like feel that shit, what they're going through, especially if you're like right there with them. Like there's no, and you're trying to like understand them, be like, oh well, because you're a person that's like, oh, that guy shouldn't have like went off on you about, your family, this, or your family member, shouldn't have went off on you like da 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 da, and then they're talking to you, or they might not be so much, or you know, they work through their emotions as they need to, and other things, and they understand that other people also, get out of sorts, because this is the moon exalts in Taurus. They actually do understand that when that person was attacking them, they had their own baggage that was like, that led them to do shit like that. Probably jealous or something else. But anyways, the next sign is Gemini moon in the fourth house. Gemini moon in the fourth house. This person likes to, you know, talk to their family members, right? They like to, talk about their family. This could show up in like good ways or bad ways, depending on how they were raised, right? Let's say that they love their family members. They're like, oh, my little brother or my mom does this, they work over there and they do that. And, they bring them up in conversation and, other things, right? Let's say that this person's like out of sorts though about shit. This person will then, run their mouth about, oh, my family members, right? I don't like him because he doesn't, he thinks he's full of himself or whatever. They'll talk like down about, certain family members and shit, in conversation and whatnot. Um, and it depends. It comes from like a lot of shit that like astrology, doesn't have any play. Like, the maybe, they don't like their dad because they weren't there, or maybe they didn't like their mom because she wasn't there, or maybe they didn't have, family at all. But if that's the case, they're probably seeking like, goddamn, this person's probably seeking people to like fulfill that spot in their life because they never had that. And that shit's kind of sad. But they'll like really try to make sure they like are smart and intelligent and like they're, clearly spoken. They want to like let you know something. Like they could come off as annoying as fuck, but they like just need to like get it out there. Let's say that they got hurt though, because this is the moon sign, right? They got hurt by somebody, or like life's like, really kicking their ass, and they want to like vent. These people need to vent. They need to talk. Like they'll be saying all kind of shit. They'll be like, today I got, fired from my job, and I don't even know why, because da 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 da, and like all these like, things and reasons and shit, and they just keep going on and on and on. And it's like, the person that, they're venting to like don't want to hear it, or maybe they do want to hear it. And these people gotta like make sure, if you have this placement, right, like some people don't want to hear that shit. Some people don't want to hear like, like your life problems and shit like that. They don't want to hear none of that. And then there's some people who might, understand and, can be there for you for some time, and, listen to what you have to say, and, maybe help you out of, whatever you're going through, and then like this person could also like when they're out of sorts or whatever, because, whatever happened in their family, their past, certain things in their life, happen, and then, they do that shit, and, it triggers them, and then they start, running their mouth about anybody, whoever triggered them. They'll start running their mouth about that person. Maybe spreading lies, or just giving like facts about them that might be true, but like they're just like emphasizing the negative aspects of these people. You know, telling people shit that they said that they were going to keep secret, then they start running their mouth about that person. Um, that's like the negative things. But like the positive things is like yeah, my this and that. My family was this way or that way, and and they can look at it and like continue to like they can still live their life, but they can like let a little bit. Yeah, I had three brothers, sisters, or whatever, and they work over there and they work over there, and this last time I saw them, this and this is what they told me, and this is and that's how this person operates. you know when they like find and are comfortable around other people, friends, and then when they're around their family, they tell them all kind of shit. My coworkers, da, 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 da. When I was working at this, da, 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 da. I wouldn't recommend you go into that type of career field because da, 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 da. And all kind of shit. They'll let you know. Um, but the next person is Cancer Moon in the fourth house. This person is like even more than like the other side, man. Like they're deeply, care about their family members. you know, they would, make sure everything is all right. You know, they're always like thinking about them. You know, thinking about their family. The people they loved, like maybe it's their mommy, their daddy, and they're always calling them like, "Mommy, Daddy, are you okay?" Like even if they're like adults and shit, "Are you okay? Do I have to come visit you? Do I have to come and stay with you for a little bit?" I don't mind if I have to come stay with you. Mostly mom though, mostly mommy, because this is the fourth house, right? And the moon is ruled by a goddess, and we know that the moon is more feminine energy, right? So they have a deep connection to their mother, and they like always check on their mother, check on their like whoever. And let's say they don't have their mom, they're still checking on their dad, whoever it is. That was like a motherly figure. It could be their big sister. Let's say they didn't have that. They still make sure they're them the ones who are like that motherly figure, or or that person who gives like that nurturing energy, and they're like I want to make sure my little brother, my you know dad, or my whoever is there is all right. Do you remember when? And they're the type of people who would bring up the past and shit, and this could play out negative ways too, when they like oh, I remember when you didn't come to my this or that, and I'm always here making sure you're all right, but you're gonna fucking da 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 da. And they like to manipulate situations and other things. But if they like being cool and shit, like, yeah, do you remember when we were little kids and we did that and did that? I hope that when we have kids, they can do similarly, and we have like great time together, that type of shit. When it plays out differently for different people, because this is like their emotional side, right? They don't show this shit to everybody. um and then when like they get around their like people that they're close with, the family members and shit, they start to like reminisce on the past and shit like that, and try to like bring that feeling back to like the present. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Depending on the situation. And what I mean by that is, you're this person's the one doing that shit, and then the people who are like past that shit, they're like, oh, I know what you're trying to get at, but like we're past that shit. We're doing new stuff now. We don't need you to talk no more. That type of shit. But then it could be like one of those situations where, yeah, I did need to remember like that shit from the past, because like we wouldn't have been here right now if we hadn't gone through that type of like hard times, or good times, or whatever it was. But this person with the Cancer Moon is gonna let you know that shit as like a family member. especially if you're their family. Like, they ain't gonna just like this is an introverted sign too, right? So like, they ain't gonna tell like a normal, Bobby, Joey, or who the fuck's out in town. They ain't gonna be running around talking about that shit with them, because they understand that those people, are not the people that they want to talk to about that shit. They want to like, bring that shit up to people who like, they know are cool, like they've been around, and they can like drop their guard around, you know. They'll tell those people shit like that. But anyways, and this person's very nurturing of like other people, and even in like, they hear something from somebody, and they happen to bring up family, then they're kind of hooked on that, and they're like, oh shit, this is going on, you know. I as a person who care about my family also I don't want you to go through that. But let me help you out however I can, and if you would need anything, just I'll have my whatever, if you're going through anything, you just want to like get away from those people, you can. But the next person is Leo Moon in the fourth house. So Leo Moon in the fourth house, this person likes to they like to have their family members around them. Like they like to bring their family members on the fun. They're like, oh, come here, brother, sister, mom, dad, everybody, make sure, let's make this a fun thing. Yeah, they try to do that shit, right? But let's say shit plays out like not like that. They're like, the one not living the past necessarily, but they're like kind of are, right? Because it's like childish a little bit. You always need people around you, and like you can't do shit for yourself. You can't just be, who you need to be for yourself. You have to like, be extra, get loud, make everything like a spectacle about whatever. When you get, and then when this person gets put off, right? They definitely do shit like that. Let's say that this person with the Leo moon, right? He or she, you know, had a problem with, when people didn't want to like do what they wanted to do, like as far as playing games go. Oh, let's play my game. Oh no, we ain't gonna do that. You know, this time, because like now they're adults and shit, and they kind of still have that in adulthood. The minute like somebody tells them like, no, we're not gonna do that, because things have been their way for a while, but then that day it's not. They get all up. They get out. So it's like, what? But we always do, and they get all sideways and upset. But we always do, and they try to turn you into the bad guy. But they're the ones that are out of sorts. You were just saying not today, and they getting all upset. And they're upset because like, they like doing that fun shit with you, your brother, their brother, their sister, their mother, their dad, and even if it ain't that, they have their friends that they see as these people. Maybe their mom or dad wasn't there, they didn't grew up with the older brother or older sister, and they have that person that they like, designate as that. And then when that person doesn't come through for them, they get all out of sorts. They get mad and they start like turning them into the bad guy, and like they'll make a spectacle. They'll like get people involved in shit sometimes, depending on what that sun sign is. They'll be like, "Hey, you are da 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 da. Hey, people, da 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 da," and they get everybody involved. They're like, "Hey, guess what? This person right here is da 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 da." Trying to humiliate people in public and shit like that. You know, that's when shit's like, not so cool. But when they're, cool, they're like, yeah, man, let's, let me celebrate, so and so today. I can actually like put myself aside. But like, you also gotta understand that I was one who suggested that we celebrate you. So you gotta kind of like, give credit to, and they be like that, you gotta, let your brother, get some of that spotlight too. But it is about you, but then they, And their family members know them to be that, because like with Leo energy, it's like you don't hide that shit. Like you might, and let's say that the sun signs in like water or earth, right, and you're more introverted or whatever. When you're around the people that know you and shit, you start to like get loud and out of sorts and shit, and they know that about you, and they do, and they know what like ticks you off and other shit. Um, and like you would fight for those people who do like show up and stuff, and then the people who don't, like, you're like actually, like, there'll be some family members you don't fuck with and stuff, and you don't want them around because they'll just fuck up that dynamic that you have going on with the family members that you do fuck with. You know what I mean? They'll just, their energy is not welcome there, so you're gonna let them know like to stay the fuck away and other things, and you might like not like that person. um and you'll definitely be the one to like let them fucking know why you don't and other things. But the moon in Virgo in the fourth house. So this person, like, okay, you know, when it comes to family members and them being their emotions and shit, right? They like their mother and shit too, or like whoever was there, and they, let's say they didn't have a mother, they try to then be that way for other people. But when it manifests with these people, right? They could be like, they get all sorts, right? So they, because it's the moon sign, right? They get all sorts. They start to like put all kinds of shit on you that you don't need on you. You really don't. But they'll like, they do see shit that you could possibly work on and shit, but they're like making it a like fucking game, or like playing games with you, because like it's like, oh, well, you ain't wearing this right kind of outfit for this kind of day, or you didn't tie your tie right, because you're a businessman now, but you ain't going into work looking like that. You better change that shit now. You better fix that tie, or it's like little things like that. They always like nitpick shit like that. You don't tie your shoes like that. I raised you and taught you how to like tie your shoes right. You're supposed to tie them like this, or you're supposed to do this or that. That's not the right way to do it. You're kind of half-assing shit, even if you ain't, doing that. You have to always be like, dotting your i's and crossing your t's like exactly the right way. you know Perfect. Like no slanted like lines and shit. Like when you draw that T, it better be like you know perpendicular, like the correct way. you know 90 degrees, perfect squares type shit. That eye cannot be like slightly off. And then they'll fuck around with you like that. They'll fuck with you on like small shit, like shit that like we don't need to like dwell on so much. We're trying to, like, if we're trying to have fun as a family member, or we were trying to like um just catch up or whatever, and they're just picking out shit because the way you did them last time, they felt like you weren't acknowledging them for what they have done for you. So then they want to get out of sorts and be like, oh well, da, 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 you didn't do this or that, or da 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 da, da 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 da, and they get like all sideways and shit. I know people who are like this, so like I actually know about this. But they also do it too, see, because sometimes like you do need that. All right. Depending on what the situation is, like let's say you have like a job going on, and they don't want to see you lose your job, because it just like, for you, it's like something that you talked about, and they don't want to see you go and fail at your job. They're like, I want you to like look good going in there. I want you to make sure you don't use these type of words when you go in there. um like, and when you hold yourself, you're like doing the best you can, you know the best you can, half-assing is, there's always room for improvement. There's always room to like do better, but like don't ever like not do your best, because when you go, you gotta like, they gotta remember you as that person who like worked diligently, worked, and like saw shit that other people didn't see. The little things matter, and that's what they try to drill into your head, and then they drill it into your head, you know it can be nitpicking sometimes where like we ain't doing that shit right now because like we're just trying to like chill and just not do shit like that, but they just can't, because something you did to them, man. It's something you did to them or somebody else did to them, and they just can't, seem to like let that shit go. Um, Probably like something you did to them though, not something somebody else did to them. Because they are earth signs. They know what the fuck happened to them and who did them wrong and who didn't. Who listened to their advice and took heed to what they had to do, and who didn't. Um, and they remember that shit too. And they try to like always make sure they're on their shit too. And then when you try to spin shit back around on them, they might not like that. But then, let's say, they're not out of sorts. They might appreciate it. They might appreciate it. And be like, okay, all right. Well, you saw where I was messing up too. Sometimes they are like that. But, when they're out of sorts, they could be like, oh, well, I'm the only one that gets to say that because you ain't the type of person to, like, you know, check it, pay attention to the small details about shit. You're not that type of person, so and so. You don't do shit like that. They be like that sometimes. But it can be good or bad in those situations, and then within the family members, and then like people who are like really close to you. Because this is the moon sign. You don't show your moon sign to everybody, because you are not comfortable, showing that part of yourself to those people, right? And so the next sign is Libra, moon in the fourth house, right? So this person, goddamn, see, this person doesn't like to see shit go south. But here's the thing about this person. See, this is Libra energy. So they like to be mediators, they like to be sweet talkers, they like to, create peace in their environment. But this person's also smart. So you gotta understand this. They will create the problem to then later swoop in and be the hero or be the person who like fixes it. See, because they're not like foolish, but like if you don't know that about them, you ain't gonna know. So like they could be like this. Let's say they're like the middle child maybe, or they're just some kid right in the family. They don't like their brother or sister, being like acknowledged, or they feel like they haven't been acknowledged enough, whatever reason. They're gonna like create a problem, you know, go say, hey, so and so did this, but I can fix this mistake. Don't worry about it, mom, dad. This fool over here did this, but they were the one who like instigated and made it him or her, their younger brother or sister, do that said thing. you know but the way that things happen and shit, hey, so and so, like, why are you doing that? I thought you were not like that. Why'd you steal this or do that, or whatever the fuck. They like cause some type of drama in the family, just so they can swoop in and then be the hero. And that's how they like get, like, that's how they want to like feel like they want to feel appreciated, so like they do shit like that. But in the like positive ways, because they can be positive too, right? And towards like shit like that, right? So like what I mean by that is they will, like, let's say it's not them at all, and then they're just there as they are, and they like talking and shit, and then there's a fight that breaks out. I don't agree that happened. When we went to the football game, you were like this or like that, you know and then the other side is saying, no, 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 you were the one who was like out of sorts and shit. And this person actually does it the right way and says, because they didn't have a hand in none of this. They were just hearing them talking, and they were like giving information of how they saw this incident, whatever happened at the football game, go down. And then these family members are like bitching at each other, and they're like, calm down. They might like divert their attention to like something else, or whatever, anything to get the calm the conflict down. But when it's like unhealthy or they're trying to like play fucking games, or mind games and fuck with people's heads a little bit, they will create the problem. Sometimes they don't create the problem, but sometimes they do create the problem, and then they swoop in and try to be the fucking hero. Yeah, and then like nobody ever knows, and they never get caught, and because the way they the way they say shit, they're calm, cool, and collected when they do that shit. And then like they're like, well, so and so, fixed their brother's mistake because their brother was being a fucking idiot, But thanks to him, now I can, sit back and relax because I know my one son's actually all right, or my daughter's all right. But that dumbass son who almost got us, fucked up, ain't, you know. But he or she with the Libra moon actually orchestrated the whole thing, and then came in and tried to be and that might lead to like sibling conflict or whatever, and and usually vying for the mother's attention, right? Because this is the moon sign, right? And then let's say they're not, and they need to be that nurturer. They need to be seen as that person who's like whatever, and they like always want their family members around and shit. They want to talk amongst their family members more than being out, and they can do that too. They have the ability to like talk to other people and shit, but like they don't feel comfortable being around and talking to other people as much as talking with my brother, my sister, or whoever. And then they'll like create a problem to fix it, just to like make shit peaceful, or better, and how they need to be. But anyways, the next sign, Scorpio. Scorpio moon in the fourth house. So Scorpio moon in the fourth house, this person is kind of like Aries a little bit, but settle about it. They're kind of sneak up on you with shit, right? So what I mean by that is you say some shit that, see, these people then go quiet. See, because this is the introvert sign, right? So you piss them off, you've triggered them. You were talking shit about their family members, or you said something that, triggered their childhood in a way that, you shouldn't have said something. And you said something that you didn't know you were supposed to say. This person, um, yeah, they're gonna like, they're gonna plot to like, fuck your life up, in some type of way. Or maybe, you did do something to one of their said family members. Like, they ain't gonna let you know shit. Like, okay, let's say you, like, bullied their little brother or their, younger sister. You, like, fucked around, or, like, you got fucked around on their, or whatever. Whatever the fuck it might be. You did one of their family members wrong. You did some shit to their dad. You, like, caused, their parents to hate them because, you got them fired. This person is like the type of fucking person, if they care about their family members enough, they'll like go out and like, handle that shit. Basically, they'll beat that person down, whoever the fuck, caused their family member that pain, that, suffering, because, somehow, you know, because like they want to like come home, and their family members, their mom, their dad, their, whoever, to like, not be there for like, to like scorn them, or like be up their ass in a, negative way, and just like, belittle them and other shit. My son, or whoever has the Scorpio moon is, a valuable member to society, or whatever, and I'm proud that that is my son or my daughter. You know, and this person, is also kind of, not immature to that shit. You know, if they, respect their parents, their family, it could be an older brother, older sister too, but mostly mom and shit, because this is the moon, right? And you've done some shit to where, it's fucked up your family dynamic at the house. This person's gonna go and like attack somebody for their family. And if it happened in front of them, and they remember what happened, it's gonna eat at them and eat at them, because like this is fixed water, so like a negative emotion that they attach to, they'll keep feeding them, and they'll be pissed for a while. They'll go silent and other things, and it's like, wow, so and so, but like other people who are like, they could feel that energy, like, don't fuck with this guy right now. He might just, or she might, go the fuck off and like, like, cook out on somebody, and they don't want to do that, but they might, they might just do that to somebody who, don't get it. And just the way that you sound, around them. They might give a warning and be like, "Hey man, shut the fuck up and leave me alone because I don't need you around me right now." They're trying to figure out how to like beat this person down or like fuck this person's life up. They might do that like immediately, or they might play the long game and like fuck somebody's life up, because they tried to fuck their family's life up. If you attack this person's family, right, in any kind of way, you're gonna get that in return. Let's say you're fucking with somebody in the family who likes to make money. You're fucking with their money. He's gonna fuck with your money, or she's gonna fuck with their money. If you're fucking with them on like just bullying them, you beat my brother's ass, now I'm gonna beat your ass. You you know threw shade on like how my family was doing shit. Now I'm gonna throw shade on how but it's gonna be worse because you now have to deal with me, somebody who has like drive, and like once I'm like fixed on something and I'm like determined to do it, like I'm gonna make sure that shit happens. And like you ain't gonna see it happen, like you ain't gonna know what happened until it happens. That's how these people are. Think of like Hiei from like Yu Yu Hakusho as opposed to somebody who's like short and loud and will tell everybody what the fuck they're gonna do. This person's gonna attack them. When it comes to like their family members and shit, right? You can they might let certain shit slide because it's not that important, but like when you bring up their past and you try to make little of that, talk down to that shit, or say that don't mean shit, they'll get upset and they will make you feel some type of way, and not in a good way. They'll make you feel bad. They'll hurt you physically and emotionally, for making them feel that. Yeah. um but yeah, they die for their family members. They'll fight for their family members too, but it's like more of a like, they don't like to cause a scene so much. They don't like to. They can though if they feel like it. Yeah. Scorpio, man, they can be dangerous sometimes. you know Typically this person's not that way though, because their sun signs and some other signs, right? But then when you like get them emotionally triggered, typically having to do with something you said about their mama, their family, and then they flip the switch and they ain't so friendly or any of that shit. They ain't happening. The next sign is Sagittarius moon in the fourth house. So this person, see, because we know Sagittarius to be one that likes to adventure and try new things and doesn't stick anywhere too long. Even if they like something, they'll still want to try other things and then go back to shit like that. What I mean by that is they still like to expand and explore and try new things. That flame doesn't ever really die out, but and they do shit like that, right? So this person does shit sporadically when they get emotional. So like they ain't like that all the time necessarily. You said something to trigger them. Now they're gonna just do something that's like out of sorts, like shit that you wouldn't want them to. Like that was a stupid fucking move. Like why would you do that? Well, you said this, so like okay, I'm gonna then like let's say like it's a sibling quarrel or whatever, and like oh, you remember that time that you almost destroyed my car, the front of my car, and they like keep telling this person with the Sagittarius moon, and like this person is one that like we gotta move past that shit, but you keep fucking with them, telling them, hey, you fucked my car up that one time, you fucked my car. They're gonna fuck your car up right then and there. They're gonna be like, okay, boom. They get out of bed, they start breaking that shit right then and there, because you kept like feeding the fire. Like, yo, we're trying to like not fucking focus on that so much. Yeah, that happened, but like chill the fuck out. We gotta move ahead with that. But you keep pecking at their dick saying da 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 da. that happened then, that happened then, that happened then. Of course they're gonna, cause like they don't like the redundantness. They don't like any type of that shit too much. Like they don't. They probably wouldn't like the Green Angel too much. Certain ones would like me. Um, but like, and this was the moon sign, so like they, you know, they don't always do that, but certain shit triggers them. So you want to bring up the past, and then you want to keep like putting, like in you know, beating it into me. Like yes, like I understand that. Like I understand that I fucked up. And you know, and you might, and this person might have already said that, but then this person keeps fucking, you know, going on and on about it. You know, they ain't gonna let it get that far. You know, depending on who it is. All right. So like, let's say this person has a little bit of, like some self control. They'll wait a little bit and then do that shit. But then like the person like that one time where you know you said what you had to do, but then you keep wanting to talk. The next time you fucking say that, I'm gonna actually dent your fucking car, and they'll let you know too. And then they'll be like, "Oh no, no," you know. And they're like, "Oh my god, my stupid ass brother, you know, sister, you know, broke my car because they, you know, they didn't want to accept what they did to me before." And then they're like, "Now you have two fucking problems. You have that car in the past, and then you have that car right now." You know. You know, and I don't agree with those actions, by the way, but like, you know, they will do that when they get out of sorts and shit, you know. The Green Angel don't agree with those actions, but they could play out that way. That was just an example, you know. It could be anything, you know. They don't like when people like, you know, maybe get trapped in the past, or they fucking, you know, be redundant about certain things, you know, that have happened already, or you know, just a person who likes to keep doing shit that they don't like. You know, they might come back to the family meeting and like, you know, they've done all kinds of shit, but you know, and then like this person who does shit repeatedly is telling them, or trying to talk down at them because they have done things, and then they're basically jealous of this person, and then this person can tell that, you know, at first they're like letting it go maybe or whatever, and they're like, okay, well, you know, maybe you can, you know, do this if you just stop doing that stuff that you're doing, you know, and try like looking at shit this way, you know, and then they try to be, you know, like that, and then, you know, one thing leads to another, and they're the ones attacking the person who's like talking and shit because they, you know, tried to fucking be, you know, nice and other things, and tell them, you know, you can, you know, try this instead of like, you know, doing this or that, you know, that could like be a game changer for you, you know, it helped me out, or whatever, you know. But that person in the family just can't fucking seem to like not get jealous of, you know, people who, you know, have had success from seeing, you know, opportunities and other things, because this person does do that, you know. And then when they're positive, right, they try to like be like, you know, yeah, you know, I actually have to get back to that shit, that's why I can't be here that long. But that person's like, oh well, my brother or sister is always gone and always this and that, you know. It ain't that they don't like their family. See, they made an appearance at the, you know, family function, so they actually do give a fuck. You gotta, like, some people gotta understand about these signages and shit, because they wanted to come and like, you know, be that little brother, big brother that they were, or whoever the fuck they are in the family, and like, you know, make shit loud and happy and be like, hey guys, you know, I showed up and stuff, but like now I gotta go, you know. And then there's that one that's like kind of like sideways about shit, you know. Sometimes they fight, you know. But at the end of the day, it's like this person with this sign, you know, likes, you know, more freedom and to like try new things, and ain't afraid to do it. Whereas that person wants to stay more secure, or they're just attached to like being around the family more, or attached to like, you know, certain things more. You know, this person doesn't get attached to shit too much. So the next, um, or allowed to slow them down too much. So the next person though is Capricorn moon in the fourth house. So this person is like a protector towards their mother and other people in the family, possibly, but definitely towards the mother. You know, if the siblings who ain't like, you know, listening to the mom ain't there, they're gonna make sure they're there, and they're gonna make sure that mom is taken care of. You she has, her bills paid for, this, that, other things. This person's also gonna, you know, be pissed off at times. Like, they don't see that, yes, mommy's, this way, mommy's that way, or maybe they didn't have a mom or whatever, and they're just like, another dad, and they're like, but guess what, I actually took what, they taught me, and I, became a, hardworking person, a person who's successful. I don't run around with the fucking foolishness that much, and even when I do, I always cut myself off, and like, don't let myself fucking, end up like you, because like they might be the one that like gets on another person, right? For like, maybe this person, right, sees that person as a failure because they didn't take shit seriously enough. Well, you're broke as a Joe right now because of da 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 da, and you were never that type of person who could like just work through it and stay disciplined. And for any amount of time, you had to always da 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 da, and they'll like reiterate shit like that to like people, and like it's like not talking down to them necessarily. It's like spitting the facts, but like in a fucked up kind of way, not in a fucked up way. Man, just being a fucking asshole. How about that? And yes, this person is right about what he's saying. Yes, you gotta have your fucking shit together by like 30, 50, whatever. Like, why the fuck are you still like this? And they're gonna like bring light to that shit, in like family functions and shit. Like, whereas and they're just, letting them know, yeah, I've actually fucking done shit. I built a business or whatever, and I'm successful from it because I don't allow myself to do what you do, where you run around and fuck with people too much, get all these kind of ideas from other people, and then shit falls out. And then you can't blame me for that. I was the one who stayed disciplined working on other shit, and, this person, I wouldn't say that they, and this person gets acted to, and then the shit that pisses this person off is that fact. Like, they were the ones who were like disciplined, strong, and other things. They couldn't show any signs of weakness or felt like they couldn't. That shit just don't go. But then like it does, because it comes out. When it comes out, it's like, they start to get physical. They throw shit around. They like grab people, and they start to like, fuck them up. When you push their buttons, and you keep doing shit that they and because they lay it on you, or they try to, they tell you this, hey, don't fuck with me when I'm doing this or that, and they've told you that, and then you insist on doing shit like that, and it gets to the point where no, I'm gonna rough you up, I'm gonna let you know, and that's me giving you a lesson, right? They don't like slow shit either. They don't like people who are slow too much. Like, just to do what you gotta do, and they see shit for what it is. For the most part, they'll be the asshole though, real quick, when like people refuse to see shit for what it is, and then they have to repeat themselves, and then they get themselves angry for that. But anyways, the next person on the list is Mr. Aquarius Moon in the 4th house. See, I don't have mine in the 4th house. Mine's in the 1st. This person, oh man, this person is kind of, they like to, think for themselves at times, right? They like to, have the ability to say and, think what they need to think. Breathe how they need to. So maybe if they grew up in a house where she was like, no, you can't have your own opinions and shit, or whatever, right? They'll be away from that. They'll get their point, try to get their point across. Of course, hey, I like to do this or this, or we need to try Instead of always being in the house, we should go out and, visit some places, or we should, maybe, our cars need to like be upgraded, not from this shit that you're driving around now, but, let's, drive these instead. It could be any kind of idea that this person has that other people, some people in the family like jive with that shit, but then other people don't. So then this person like just tries to just avoid them, and and still, and sometimes because like they like to still like give them that way because it's information that they ain't taking and shit, like. But I can still, you can still upgrade that car to this or that, or you could, stand to not be in this house so much, old man, or uh, mom, whatever, and they're bringing that information to them, and this parent's either like, okay, my son's trying to, or my daughter's trying to like, like me to like some shit that I might have not have thought of, or and then older people get stuck in their ways or whatever, and shit like that. So it might be the siblings that listen to them, or maybe nobody's listening to them, and they're just like, okay, well, I have to like be away from you guys then. Not because I don't love you or anything, but because you guys do not listen to the ideas I have, or listen to it, or care to listen to it, or any of that. So I'm gonna like find people who are like minded, and will, and this person will do that. But they always remember their family, and guess what? They will come back to their family and like run that shit on them again. When I was with my friends, we discovered, this and this, this is why you should have this kind of car instead of this kind of car that you drive around, and they bring up new information that they gathered from other people when they go back, and they still have the same, idea present, but then they have like, new information about that, and then they like lay it on them and shit. And either then their family, finally gets the point, or they don't, but this person's always that kind of person who's like, I got some shit for you guys, but you can either listen to me, and this is what it is, or okay, you chose to do that, but don't get mad at me, or say that I'm stupid because I didn't do enough research, or I didn't try to like, talk to other people, or whatever. When it's actually you who's like not trying to like, socialize with other people, or or fixed in your ways, certain ways, and maybe I am, a little bit, too free-winded at times, but I don't think I'm like that out of pocket. It makes some kind of like sense, you know, but it might not sometimes though. It might be some ridiculous shit, and that could like never happen. Like don't like in like certain family, um, function certain ways, and this person just doesn't understand that their family will never change, and they still try to like come back, and do that, and not like realizing that no, your family doesn't do that. They don't fucking do that. They'll never do that. That's just not who they are, and they have to just accept that, and then they don't, and then they try to like do that shit, and it's that your family members don't do that stuff, man. You probably have to find friends and shit, and you have the ability to find friends and shit, man, and it hurts too, but you, as an Aquarius moon, do have that ability to like find people and talk to them, and you find people who like actually jive with that shit, or and want to like figure some shit out with you. It just hurts because you put so much thought and energy into like them, that they weren't appreciative of like you thinking about them. They were saying other things like, oh, you don't appreciate what I did for you in the past, and you're more of a forward thinker, when you're like, when it comes to like shit that's like really meaningful, and shit to you, and you were just doing it because you wanted to see them do better. You wanted to see, and it wasn't anything like, oh, I win the conversation of which car is better or whatever. It's like you actually don't want them to drive a piece of shit, but they just want to keep driving that piece of shit because and then you have to realize that they just won't see it your way. And that could go for like your close friends too, depending on, because like you might not have family, whatever. People's lives are different. But anyways, the last person is Pisces moon in the fourth house. This person's very caring about their family too. They can sense when somebody's like having a bad day. They have great intuition. That's what that means. Pisces moon, any water, they have great intuition. They can like sense shit about people. Like you don't even have to say a fucking word. You trying to hide shit too, like you're trying to put on a brave face or some shit. They'll be like, no, you know, you know, mom, dad, maybe they are the older sibling or whatever. They're like, or younger sibling. They're like, stop that shit right now. You know that I'm here for you, right? Like, I know something's wrong with you right now. You gotta tell me what the fuck's going on, and we can, figure this shit out. We're a family, you know. I don't want to feel that negative energy coming off me. That shit's gonna make me out of sorts. That shit's gonna make me feel negative. I want to help you get past what you're going through, so I don't have to feel that. And once you're good, then you're good. But hey, man, I can tell that something's not right with you. Is there anything that I can do? Because I will do it to make sure that you are not like this. I don't want you to be down like that. Everything in my power. And then if they can't, they try to just avoid those people. And why do they avoid them? Not because they don't love these people, but because they can't do anything for this person. It could be a lot of reasons. This person might have a fixed attitude. Maybe they don't have a fixed attitude, and it's just like a situation that this person they wish they could. Like, I wish I could help them out, but I'm just like, I can't fix this problem. And then this person might then, get on themselves about it, out of like, because like I want to be that one that's there for my family and shit. But for some reason in this situation, I can't be, something that's out of their control and shit. But they still like get on themselves and they get, you know, they're hard on themselves and they, tell themselves lies and shit. Like it's not that you're not enough, you feeling bad for them and wanting them to like get through this hard time, that's you caring enough, if it's a situation that you can't control, like in any kind of way, because you're that type of person, like you will like go, you have the balls to like fight for your family, you'll, speak up for your family, you will, man, do all kind of shit to make sure that they are all right, because when we're up, and then when we're down, and you feel that, you get that impact, that shit impacts your energy, and you might be the one like lying about shit too, though, you know, you might make a situation that is like pretty fucked up, seem like it's like light, you try to like, come in there and make shit, better just to change the mood, and I know, and these people do it, so you know, we have, something to work towards, and it feels good. It's a good feeling, but we also have to make that shit happen. And, and then, family dynamics are different, right? So, shit could crumble or whatever. And, you're just trying to like make people like, feel better. But like this could play out negatively too. Let's say, that you as this person feel hurt about something somebody did to you in the past, because this is how these people with water signs are, you're gonna like bring that shit up and keep bringing it up, you're gonna make shit, toxic then, too, because you are, of some wisdom, that when you, bring this shit up, repetitively, or maybe you ain't bringing it up repetitively, but the way you're saying shit, you're making them feel like, or like the villain and shit, like they're the like worst fucking human being in the world because of like what they did, and like it might not have been that big of a deal, but you want to like cause fucking problems and shit for people instead of, being that other thing that I was talking about earlier, want to turn something, or keep their, positive energy positive, and even offer like, other, things, hey, did you ever think about doing this or that, to like help your situation out. You're gonna, this situation, you're gonna like, feed that bullshit. You're gonna be like, oh, Yeah, in the past you've done this and done that and done this and done that. You could never change. You could never be like me, or so and so. You've always done da 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 da. And it's like it might not be the repetitiveness, right? But you're gonna say it in a way that's like really like, okay, you really think that I'm a fucked up person like that, huh? And then you're gonna cause problems for yourself. So try not to do shit like that. You don't like to be talked that way, so don't talk to other people that way. And you know that as a fucking Pisces moon. Because that's a sign of wisdom. But anyways, this was the sun in the, or not sun, moon in the fourth house, as told by Darius the Great Angel. And next week I'll be here with the Mercury in the fourth house. But be cool on the corner, and I'll have some other videos coming up.